They cast her out when the blizzard was at its worst. Not at dawn when the sun could still pretend the world was kind. Not at midday when patrols might notice a body frozen near the boundary stones and drag it back for burial. They waited for night, when the wind screamed loud enough to swallow any plea, and the snow fell so thick it erased tracks within minutes. Rhea stood at the edge of Ironpine Pack's great gates, her cloak already stiff with frost, her eyelashes clumped with snow. Torches burned high on the walls, but the flame looked weak against the storm, bending and flinching as if it feared what lived in the dark beyond. Behind her, the pack formed a half-circle. No one stood close enough to warm her. No one offered a hand or even a word. They were all there to witness the same thing, the final removal of the Omega who had become inconvenient. The Alpha King, Kale Stormborn, stepped forward through the crowd like the storm had parted for him. He wore a heavy black coat lined with wolf fur, a silver clasp shaped like the Ironpine crest at his throat. His eyes were pale gold, cold, sharp, unreadable. He did not look angry. That was what made it cruel. "Rhea," he said, voice calm enough to be mistaken for mercy, "you have been given chances." Rhea's throat burned from swallowing tears she refused to shed. Crying in front of them was a weakness they enjoyed too much. She kept her chin lifted even as the wind slapped her face raw. "I worked," she forced out. "I did what you asked." A few wolves in the crowd shifted, uncomfortable, as if the memory of her usefulness tried to fight the verdict. Rhea had hauled water when ice cracked the buckets. She had stitched torn cloaks by firelight until her fingers bled. She had cared for injured pups and never once demanded thanks. But gratitude was a currency Ironpine did not spend on Omegas. Kale's gaze swept over her like a blade measuring flawed steel. "You failed to shift," he said simply. "You failed to form a bond. You failed to become what your place requires." Her stomach twisted. The words were true in the way a fist to the ribs was true, undeniable and meant to hurt. "I tried," she whispered, and hated how small her voice sounded beneath the storm. The elder beside Kale lifted a staff carved with ancient runes. "The pack cannot carry weakness into winter." Rhea flinched at the word. Weak. They always used that word as if it explained everything, as if it erased the hours of labor and the years of obedience, as if it turned her into a simple equation, less strength equals less worth. Kale did not correct the elder. He nodded once, slow, deliberate, like a king signing an execution. "You will leave our territory," he declared, "tonight." A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Some faces tightened. Some looked away. A few looked satisfied, as if her exile reassured them that their own place was safe for another day. Rhea's breath fogged in front of her mouth, thick and white. Her fingers were numb inside her gloves. She glanced at the gates, massive iron bars rimmed with frost, the last barrier between her and the forest. "Alpha," she said, and the word tasted like ash. "If I go out there now, Kale stepped closer. He lowered his voice so only she could hear. "That is not my concern anymore." The finality in his tone slammed into her harder than the wind. Two guards moved to the gate crank. Iron groaned. The doors began to open inch by inch, and the storm shoved itself through the widening gap like something alive, a beast eager to claim her. Snow blasted into the courtyard, stinging eyes coating stone. The torches sputtered. The pack held their ground behind Kale, warm inside their walls of power. Rhea took one step toward the opening and felt the world beyond swallow sound. The forest was a black mouth. The blizzard was its breath. She looked back once. Kale's eyes met hers, no regret, no hesitation. Just certainty. Rhea turned away. If she stayed to plead, she would die as their pathetic Omega. If she walked, she might die anyway, but at least it would be on her feet. She crossed the threshold into the storm. The gates slammed behind her. The sound was muffled by snow, but the message was clear. She was no longer Ironpine. The wind pushed her sideways immediately, trying to break her. Snow filled her hair, her collar, her mouth. She stumbled, caught herself, forced her legs to keep moving. The trees ahead were barely visible, dark pillars swaying like ghosts. Her lungs burned with every breath. She tried to follow the faint path she knew led toward the old hunting grounds, but the storm erased direction. Minutes blurred. The cold bit through cloth into flesh. Her feet began to drag, heavy as stones. Not here, her mind begged, not like this. She fell to her knees in the snow. The blizzard roared. Rhea pressed her palms to the ground, trying to push up, but her arms shook violently. Her body was giving up, betrayed by hunger and cold and exhaustion. A sob broke loose despite her. "I wasn't weak," she whispered into the snow. "I was just alone." The world answered with silence. Then something else. A presence. She didn't hear it at first. She felt it. The way the wind shifted, the way the snow seemed to hesitate, the way the forest around her grew suddenly attentive. Rhea lifted her head. Between two trees, a pair of eyes glowed. Not human eyes. Wolf eyes. Bright, steady, watching her through the storm. Another pair appeared. Then another. A circle of faint lights in the darkness, closing in without sound. Rhea's heart stuttered. Fear rose instinctively. Rogues, predators, death coming faster than the cold. But the eyes did not advance like hunters. They watched like guardians. The nearest shape stepped forward, massive, dark, its fur dusted with white. It moved with calm authority, as if it belonged to the storm itself. Rhea tried to crawl backward. Her body failed. The wolf stopped just a few feet away. It lowered its head. Not in threat. In recognition. And in that impossible moment, as the blizzard raged and her pack's rejection still burned like a wound, Rhea understood something that made her breath catch in her throat. She had been cast out by wolves who believed strength was domination. But the wolves in the forest were looking at her like she was something else entirely. Like she was theirs. The blizzard was winning. Rhea no longer felt her feet. The pain had burned itself out and left only a numb heaviness that dragged at her legs as if the snow were reaching up to claim her piece by piece. The forest around her blurred into smears of shadow and white. The wolves, glowing eyes the only steady shapes left in a world unraveling into cold. She tried to stand again. Her knees buckled instantly. The fall knocked what little air she had left from her lungs, a ragged wheeze tearing from her throat as she hit the frozen ground face first. Snow filled her mouth. She tasted blood where she'd bitten her lip, trying not to scream. "I can't," she whispered to no one. "Please, I can't." The words were lost to the storm, but something else heard her. The nearest wolf moved. Rhea felt the shift in the air before she saw it, the heavy presence coming closer, blocking the wind like a wall of living warmth. Her fingers twitched uselessly against the snow as she rolled weakly onto her side, bracing for teeth, for claws, for the end she had been told she deserved. It didn't come. Instead, a massive dark shape settled beside her. The wolf did not crowd her face. It did not bare its fangs or pin her with its weight. It lay down, close enough that its fur brushed her sleeve, warm enough that she gasped at the contrast against the killing cold. The blizzard howled around them, but in the narrow pocket of space the wolf's body created, the wind softened. Rhea's vision swam. She thought she must be hallucinating. Heat did not appear in storms like this. Yet the warmth pressed steadily against her side, seeping through cloth, through skin, into bone. She turned her head weakly. The wolf's silver-flecked eyes met hers. There was no hunger in them. No calculation. Only attention. Another wolf approached. Then another. They came not in a rush, not with the frenzy of a kill, but with quiet intent. One positioned itself at her back, shielding her spine from the worst of the wind. A third lay across her legs, heavy enough to anchor her to the ground so the storm could not drag her away. Her breath stuttered in disbelief. "Why?" she croaked. The wolves did not answer. They didn't need to. They kept coming until the forest around her was no longer empty. 10 shapes settled into place, forming a living ring around her broken body, each choosing a position with instinctive precision, blocking wind, trapping warmth, turning her fall in the snow into the center of a sanctuary no pack had ever offered her. Rhea lay there stunned, as sensation crept painfully back into her limbs. It hurt, the slow, sharp sting of thawing nerves. She clenched her teeth to keep from crying out, tears leaking anyway as feeling returned in uneven waves. The nearest wolf shifted at the sound, pressing closer. Her hands, which had been clenched uselessly in the snow, loosened. Her fingers brushed fur. The texture was unreal, thick, soft, radiating life. She'd touched wolves before in Frostville when she cleaned wounds or brushed out burrs from coats. But this was different. These wolves were not tolerating her. They were choosing her. The storm screamed around the circle, but inside it there was only breath, slow, steady, layered, surrounding her like the heartbeat of something much larger than herself. Her tears soaked into dark fur. "I don't belong anywhere," she whispered. The wolf nearest her exhaled, a long, even breath that fogged the air between them. Rhea's eyes closed despite her determination to stay awake. Sleep crept in, heavy and unavoidable, dragging her under like deep water. Her last conscious thought was not fear, not grief, but bewilderment at the impossible truth curling around her. She had been cast out to die, and the forest had answered by keeping her alive. Rhea woke to warmth. Not the shallow warmth of fire that faded when you shifted too far, and not the imagined comfort of memory that disappeared the moment you tried to hold it. This was deep, layered, coming at her from every direction at once, steady enough to make her wonder if the storm had ever existed at all. For a moment, she did not move. She was afraid that if she did, the illusion would shatter. Then she felt breath on her cheek. Her eyes flew open. She lay in the center of a ring of wolves. They were not packed tightly against her like prisoners in a storm den. They were arranged, curved inward with purpose, bodies overlapping just enough to seal out the cold. Fur brushed her shoulders and calves, heavy and alive. Every inhale she took carried the scent of pine, frost, and something wild that made her heart ache. The blizzard had passed. Soft morning light filtered down through the trees, catching in drifting snowflakes that settled harmlessly on the wolves' coats. Beyond the living wall, the forest stood quiet and pristine, as if the night had never tried to kill her. The wolf closest to her face lifted its head as her breath caught. It was enormous, black fur streaked faintly with silver, eyes the color of storm clouds just before lightning. It did not bare its teeth. It only studied her, unblinking, as though waiting to see if she was real. "You're still here," Rhea whispered. Her voice sounded wrong in the silence, too small, too fragile for the way the forest felt now. The wolf blinked once. Another wolf shifted behind her, its weight settling more firmly against her back. Warmth surged again through her spine, and Rhea bit her lip as pins and needles prickled through limbs that had nearly frozen hours earlier. She tried to sit up. Instantly, the wolves adjusted. Two moved closer to brace her shoulders. One stretched across her knees, anchoring her so she wouldn't slip back into the snow. It wasn't restraint. It was assistance. Rhea's throat tightened painfully. "I don't understand," she murmured. "I didn't do anything to deserve this." The silver-flecked wolf's ears twitched. Then it did something she had never seen a wild wolf do. It bowed its head. Not deeply, not theatrically. Just enough to make the gesture unmistakable. A ripple passed through the circle as the other wolves followed suit, lowering their heads toward her in quiet unison. Rhea sucked in a sharp breath. This was not instinct. This was recognition. Her hand rose slowly, shaking as badly as it had in Ironpine's courtyard. She half expected the wolves to recoil, to remind her that she was fragile and out of place even here. They didn't. Her fingers sank into the thick fur at the silver-flecked wolf's throat, and for a heartbeat she forgot how to breathe. The forest hummed, not with sound but with sensation, a deep awareness that made her skin prickle as though the world itself had leaned closer to listen. Beneath her tattered sleeve, something warm pulsed faintly, a slow rhythm that did not belong to her heart. She pressed her palm against it, startled. The sensation spread up her arm into her chest, and with it came a flash of understanding that did not arrive as words. She saw ancient shapes in her mind, wolves kneeling not to kings but to figures who carried no crown, circles formed in moonlit glades, storms bending away from a single still presence at their center. Not rulers. Anchors. Her breath hitched. "I was never meant to belong to Ironpine," she whispered. The wolves did not answer. They did not need to. They tightened their circle by a fraction, not confining, but confirming, and Rhea understood then, with a certainty that made her hands tremble, that whatever she had been to the pack that cast her out, She was something else to the forest. Ironpine did not sleep well the night Rhea vanished into the blizzard. They told themselves it was only the storm rattling the beams, the way winter always made the mountains groan like wounded animals. But when dawn crept reluctantly over the stone walls, the pack rose with a tension that had nothing to do with cold. The hunters were the first to notice it. They left before the sun fully claimed the sky, expecting to find the usual signs of winter. Thin tracks of deer, frozen rivers, the quiet ache of hunger that always came before the thaw. What they found instead were wolves. Not Ironpine wolves. Tracks cut across the hunting grounds in wide arcs, too many and too deliberate to be dismissed as a passing rogue. The imprints were deep, heavy with purpose, and they circled something beyond the border markers rather than crossing into pack territory. The scouts returned pale-faced. "There are wolves gathering near the frostwood," one said, voice pitched low as if afraid the forest might overhear him. "They aren't hunting, they're standing watch." The Alpha King, Kale Stormborn, dismissed the report at first. "Winter makes fools imaginative," he said, pacing the council chamber. "A few rogues mean nothing." Yet his wolf did not settle. It prowled beneath his skin with restless unease, snapping at instincts that had not stirred in years. The bond between Kale and Ironpine's lands, the deep-rooted connection that made him alpha, tugged faintly, not in threat but in warning. By midday, the reports multiplied. Scouts swore they heard howls layered so precisely they sounded like a single voice stretched across many throats. A patrol claimed the forest itself felt different, quieter, not empty but attentive, as though it were waiting for something to happen. Kale stopped dismissing. He descended into the vaults beneath Ironpine, where ancient carvings lined the stone walls, their symbols half erased by time and neglect. He had walked past them 100 times without thought, considering them little more than relics of a primitive age. Now he stood before them, as if seeing them for the first time. A circle of wolves. At their center, a solitary figure, unarmed, uncrowned, hands lifted not in command but in calm. The runes beneath were fractured, but one phrase remained legible. "When the storm rejects the still one, the forest will crown her." Kale's throat went dry. Rhea's face rose unbidden in his mind, her bowed head, her refusal to beg, the way the blizzard had swallowed her like something owed. The words he had spoken to her echoed with sudden clarity. "That is not my concern anymore." His wolf stirred violently, not in anger, but in something dangerously close to remorse. Outside, howls rose again, closer this time. Kale Stormborn did not call his guards. He did not summon the council or announce his departure with the heavy ritual Ironpine expected of its Alpha King. He simply pulled on his winter cloak, secured the silver clasp at his throat, and walked out of the keep as though he were slipping away from something he could no longer outrun. The pack watched from behind frost-rimed windows and half-open doors, pretending not to notice the tension coiling in his stride. Kale had never walked into the forest alone when reports of strange wolves circled their lands. Today he did, and the land felt it. The boundary stones loomed ahead, their carved faces nearly erased by drifting snow. As Kale crossed them, the sounds of Ironpine faded abruptly, the clatter of training yards, the muted calls of hunters, the scrape of stone on stone. The forest swallowed him whole. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered in the hush that followed. Branches creaked under the weight of fresh snow, releasing occasional showers of white that fell like ash. Kale followed the path the scouts had described, faint disturbances in the drifts, a widening arc that did not cross Ironpine's borders but curved protectively around something deeper in the frostwood. He smelled them before he saw them. Not the sharp scent of a single pack, but a woven tapestry of many, old blood, new blood, territories he did not recognize braided together in the cold air. His wolf stiffened beneath his skin, unsettled by the absence of challenge in the mingled trails. 10 shapes emerged between the trees. They did not rush him, they did not bare their teeth. They formed a line across the narrow glade, fur thick with snow, eyes reflecting the pale winter sun. These were not rogues. Their stillness carried discipline, not the kind taught by dominance, but the kind learned by loyalty. Kale slowed his steps. "I seek no fight," he said quietly, the words instinctive rather than strategic. The wolves did not move. The largest among them, dark-coated with silver streaks along its spine, stepped forward. It did not lower its head in challenge. It held his gaze with unnerving calm, as if measuring not his strength but his intent. "What do you guard?" Kale demanded. The wolf's ears flicked. Behind them, deeper in the trees, Kale felt it, a presence that tugged faintly at something he had ignored for too long. It was not the mate bond, not territory. It was the land itself, shifting its weight, making space for a center that did not belong to him. A memory rose unbidden. Rhea standing in the courtyard with snow in her hair, eyes lifted not in defiance but in endurance. He took a step forward. The wolves moved as one, closing the space he aimed for. Kale stopped. This had never happened to him. Packs bent or broke before Ironpine's alpha, yet these wolves neither challenged nor submitted. They refused. And in their refusal was a claim he did not yet have the language to deny. The silence between Kale and the wall of wolves stretched, until even the forest seemed to hold its breath. Snow drifted lazily from overburdened branches, falling in slow spirals that settled on dark fur and melted without sound. The wolves did not flinch. Their attention was fixed not on the Alpha King who had never been denied anything on his own lands, but on something behind them, something he could not yet see. The barn lay deeper in the frostwood, hidden from Ironpine by a bend in the path and a tangle of pines. Kale strained to look past the wolves, his gaze catching on the suggestion of a structure half swallowed by winter. He took a careful step sideways, testing the edge of the barrier they had formed. The wolves shifted instantly, mirroring his movement with perfect coordination. "Enough," Kale said, anger threading into his voice. "I will not be barred on my own territory." The silver-streaked wolf met his eyes. Not with hostility, with judgment. Kale opened his mouth to speak again when a soft creak broke the tension, the sound of old wood bending under a cautious hand. The barn door moved. The wolves did not turn. They parted, only slightly, only enough to reveal the figure emerging from the shelter they had defended with their bodies all morning. Rhea stepped into the pale winter light. She was thinner than he remembered, her cloak hanging loose around her shoulders, hay clinging to the hem. Snow dusted her hair where it had not yet melted from the storm, yet there was a stillness to her posture that had not existed in the courtyard, a groundedness that drew the eye without effort. She stopped behind the line of wolves, her gaze lifting to meet Kale's. "You came," she said. The words were not a greeting. They were a recognition. Kale felt his wolf recoil, not from threat but from something dangerously close to awe. He searched her face for the tremor he had dismissed as weakness, the fear, the apology, the instinct to bow. None of it was there. "You were ordered to leave Ironpine lands," he said, clinging to the language of authority as if it were a lifeline. "I did," Rhea replied, "and I did not return." The answer unsettled him more than defiance ever could. A faint warmth stirred beneath her sleeve, so subtle it might have been imagined, but Kale saw it, a whisper of gold like sunlight trapped under skin. His breath caught. "What is happening here?" he demanded. Rhea hesitated just for a moment. Then she stepped forward. The wolves parted again, wider this time, allowing her through the living wall without a single sound. She stopped a few paces from Kale, the snow between them unmarked by struggle. "They heard me," she said quietly. Who, Kale asked, though he already knew the answer was not the one he expected. "The forest," Rhea replied. "The wolves, whatever still listens when no one else does." Kale felt the ground tilt under his feet, not physically, but in the way a truth reshapes the world around it. He saw now what he had refused to look for before, the way the wolves leaned subtly toward her, the way their stillness radiated outward from her position like ripples from a stone dropped into water. She was not being protected. She was being centered. The warmth beneath her sleeve pulsed again, brighter this time, and Kale's wolf whimpered softly within him, not in submission, but in recognition of something it had been taught to forget. "You were never weak," Rhea continued. "You just didn't have a place that knew how to hold you." Kale bowed his head before he realized he was doing it. Kale's knees did not bend because he chose to kneel. They bent because something older than Ironpine, older than kings and crests and carved stone halls, shifted its weight through the forest, and his body remembered what his mind had forgotten. The silver-streaked wolf moved first. It stepped forward from the line and lowered its head until its brow brushed the snow at Rhea's feet. The gesture was neither obedience nor fear. It was recognition so deep it reshaped the air around it. The other wolves followed. One by one, the great dark shapes inclined their heads in silent unison, forming a perfect circle around Rhea, not a barrier but a crown. Cale felt the world tilt. His breath shuddered out of him as he dropped fully to his knees in the snow, the cold biting through cloth and skin without mercy. Yet he did not flinch. The pain was grounding, a reminder that this moment was real, that the authority he had wielded so casually had never truly belonged to him. "I did not see you," he said hoarsely. Rhea closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, Cale feared she would turn away, that she would leave him kneeling in the storm as he had left her. Instead, she exhaled slowly, as if releasing something she had carried alone for too long. "I didn't know I could be seen," she replied. The golden warmth beneath her sleeve flared softly, not in spectacle but in steady illumination, the kind that does not blind but clarifies. The forest answered with a hush that felt like reverence. Cale bowed his head until his brow touched the snow. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not deserve it. He accepted the truth that had waited patiently for him to stop pretending he was the center of anything. The wolves did not howl. They did not roar. They simply held their positions, sealing Rhea into the stillness they had chosen for her, and in that silence she was crowned. They did not announce her return. There were no horns blown at Ironpine's gates, no banners unfurled, no elders rushing to assemble the council. The forest carried her back the way it had carried her away, quietly, on breath and paw and instinct older than language. Rhea walked at the center of the path, the snow parting beneath her boots as though the land itself made room. 10 wolves moved with her, not in a rigid formation but in a fluid orbit that shifted with every bend in the trail. They did not need to block her now. The territory itself leaned toward her presence, recognizing something that Ironpine had forgotten how to honor. Cale followed several paces behind. Not as her guard, not as her equal, as witness. When Ironpine's watchtower caught sight of the movement in the trees, the alarm bells never rang. The guard simply froze, hands stilled on rope and steel as the forest opened, and the queen they had exiled emerged at its heart. The pack gathered without being called. Warriors drifted down from ramparts. Omegas stepped cautiously from shadowed doorways. Even the elders came, slower, leaning heavier on staffs carved with symbols they had long stopped believing in. Rhea stopped before the gates. She did not look back at Cale for permission. She did not raise her voice. "I did not come to rule you," she said, and the words carried without effort through the hush. "I came because I no longer belong to a place that measures worth by noise." No one interrupted. No one dared. The wolves settled behind her, their presence a living horizon. "I was cast out because I could not become what you wanted," Rhea continued. "But the forest showed me that I am not broken, only unheard." A murmur rippled through the gathered pack, not of dissent, but of recognition too sharp to ignore. Cale stepped forward then, not to reclaim authority, but to relinquish illusion. He knelt at the threshold of his own gates, lowering himself before the girl he had condemned to die. The pack gasped. Rhea did not reach for him. She looked beyond him, to the Omegas who had learned to fold themselves into corners, to the warriors who had learned to perform strength until it devoured them from the inside. "You do not need another king," she said. "You need to remember how to stand beside one another without fear." The wolves howled then, not a battle cry, but a layered call that wove through stone and bone alike, a sound that did not command but invited. And Ironpine changed. Not in a day, not in a decree, but in the slow, stubborn way that forests reclaim ruins, root by root, breath by breath. The barn at Frostwood was never torn down. It became a place of gathering, where wolves went when they could not speak in halls built for shouting. The elders learned to listen. The Omegas learned to lift their eyes. And when winter storms raged loud enough to drown the world, the pack remembered the night they cast out a girl who had nothing but snow, and woke to find the forest had crowned her anyway. Rhea never wore a crown. She never needed one.